practice more.
Long story short, I bet $50,000 that if Lula doesn't beat Divinity by the end of 5YL, I'm bankrupt out of all my money. So if she loses, I might just kill myself. My name is Cheyne Ali Anderson, also known as NoxiMation. I'm an artist and animator currently working on my own animated series titled The Changers, but today, I want to talk about my involvement in the 5 Years Later series created by the Ink Tank. 5 Years Later is a crossover fan event between Ben 10 and Danny Phantom. It takes place 5 years after their respective shows ended, aiming to unite the fandoms and give the main characters a conclusion that their official releases arguably failed to provide. I got involved with the project after posting music in the Xanderflix Discord server in late 2020. Xanderflix hired me for Ben One Last Time, which was showcased during the Ben's 15th livestream anniversary event. This led Kuro, the creator of 5 Years Later, to hire me to arrange music for the Ben 10 breakdowns. After submitting music for the 5YL motion comic test Dreams and Nightmares and creating an original Vlad Plasmius theme in 2021, Kuro brought me on to compose music for the entire series. I've been watching Kuro the artist's videos since high school, and I was a huge fan of his Ben 10 Compete Goku and Superman video. Although I was a little salty as a Goku fanboy, I was also impressed by how Kuro managed to expand the Ben 10 fandom and improve its reputation. For this project, I wanted to ensure that 5YL had its own unique identity rather than just relying on callbacks. I experimented with instrumentation for different characters and aimed for a completely different vibe from my animated series The Changers, which is heavily influenced by hip-hop, drum and bass, and rap rock. In contrast, 5YL is more orchestral with elements of hard rock and techno. When I was first asked to compose a soundtrack, I was fucking ecstatic. Composing for 5YL was a lot of fun, but it also had its challenges. One of the biggest challenges was the timing. In some scenes, I had to match the beat of my music to specific visual elements. Because I usually storyboard my projects using placeholder tracks, I'm aware of the general timing that the scenes I make require before I even boot up FL Studio. But for 5YL, I had to compose based on whatever finished visuals, sound effects, and voice acting Kuro gives me. I definitely got better with that over time, but it was a major setback in the first few episodes. Vlad's story, specifically, had a bit of a back and forth because I had to match both the tone of the panels appearing on screen and the tempo of the clock that was already included in the cut.
And the tempo of the clock turned out to be uneven.
Go fucking figure! Another challenge was that the main theme of 5YL had already been created by Jake Neutron. I had to adapt his melody to fit the tone of the comic itself, which resulted in me giving it a more dark and drawn-out aura to reflect the drama. Overall, I think the 5 Years Later comic is super impressive. It has a consistent story arc that harkens back to the early days of Alien Force and Ultimate Alien, but is executed much more concretely. I also appreciate how the comic stays true to the original characters while still allowing them to grow and develop. Ben, in particular, is portrayed as a more flawed and relatable character than in the actual show, which I find refreshing. His conflict regarding staying true to his morals and risk of becoming like Eon reminds me of the scrapped DJW concept of Ben 100. In general, my favorite episode has to be 7. God damn it.
My favorite number is 7. 7-Eleven, bitch!
Episode 7, number 1, because of its exploration with the psyche of the leading characters. Kuro shows a fundamental and intrinsic understanding of what makes both Ben 10 and Danny Phantom tick. Their wants, their needs, their goals, and their struggles. And it's that complete understanding that makes 5IL seem less like a fan fiction and more of a continuation of canon than sometimes the actual canon can be.
By the way, when Paul Eiding came back as Grandpa Max, you thought you niggas were shook? I had to compose that. And every time I loaded up FL, a tear was shed.
Not all the music for the motion comic was composed by me. Due to either time constraints or creative decision, a fraction of the background music is taken from Epidemic Sound. However, episode 7 thus far is the only one where I've done all the music. And if you've guessed that's because it's my favorite, the art style of the comic is mostly great, although there are a few designs I'm not a huge fan of, like Way Big and Atomics. This is a nitpick I have with all the Ben 10 series really, as the dramatic art style changes give way to some character designs that I don't really fuck with personally. Conversely, the animation in the motion comic is also impressive, especially considering the limitations of the format.
I think it's changed so significantly to fit a cinematic context that it might as well be considered an animated series in its own right. The use of motion comics as a legitimate cinematic storytelling device is not really utilized enough, and I think there is so much goddamn potential in store. 5YL is the first project I've seen where a lot of that potential is tapped into in a long-term narrative context. I would like to highlight a few key pieces from the soundtrack and share the thought process behind them. Episode 7 marks a turning point for the story of the series, so most of the musical ideas will be reflected accordingly. Main theme. I took Jake Neutron's main melody and transformed it to fit the tone of 5YL. My arrangement has a darker and more heroic feel than the original, and additional parts are added to the main sting, starting with episode 7. Danny's themes. This theme is the only one that heavily references Danny Phantom's old music. It's meant to convey that he's out of practice and hasn't yet carved out a new identity for himself. But starting with episode 7, as he embraces his role as mission leader, his motif transitions into an original one. Even more so, I plan for this theme to morph into a more fearful one once Danny starts losing control of his powers and enters a rage state. You can already see hints of this once Danny uses his flaming howl in episode 6. Ben's themes. I loosely based Ben's theme on the Ultimate Alien Force leitmotif, as I think it's the best one that fits the tone of the story. However, I also incorporated some callbacks from Omniverse and the original series. Starting with episode 7, Ben gains a second theme that represents Alien X. It's not that complex in its melody, but it's meant to be angelic and powerful to the point of being almost oppressive. Vlad's theme is entirely original. I wanted it to be gothic and tragic, reflecting Vlad's complex character. When played in reverse, it's almost identical to Danny's second theme, showing the mirroring ideals they have while utilizing the same powers. Eon has two themes, representing how he sees himself, first, a herald of peace for his people, versus how we see him, second, a genocidal maniac.
The motif that represents how he sees himself is used abundantly throughout the first several episodes. But starting with 7, we hear more and more of his theme as taken from the perspective of the heroes. I'm planning for these two themes to converge into one once he uses the Godmaker to become divinity. In fact, if you play Eon's first theme in reverse, it's almost exactly the same as Ben's Alien X theme, showing their mirroring ideals. Both are playing the role of God, but Eon for himself and Alien X for everyone else. Some other notable themes include the fight scene riff, Technis' theme, and the Orion Squad theme. I believe 5IL is a groundbreaking project that will significantly impact the Ben 10 fandom, if not already, and the future of animation adjacent projects. It is the first of its kind, and I can't wait to see what other fan-made projects will emerge as a result.
I'm not done yet.
5IL OST out now. Get it on fucking YouTube. Get it on fucking Spotify. Get it on fucking Apple Music. Get it on fucking Amazon. Get it on fucking Tidal. Get it on LimeWire. Get it on, VHS cassette tapes. Have a fucking store. Check out my music channel if you want to hear behind the scenes music and alternate themes that are not featured in the comic. Please do that. I need the ad revenue to pay my 50 kids. I don't fucking know.